Continuing from the previous part, Vikir had found the dungeon guarded by Cerberus. In his past life's memories, Vikir had visited this place 10 years later. Back then, it was empty, but now things were different. Amidst the stench of decay, Vikir could smell mana in the air, a sign that this place had remained untouched by anyone. The dungeon seemed quite deep, with no light reaching the end of the path. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Vikir felt no fear. On the contrary, he was strangely exhilarated, eager to uncover the treasures hidden within. The deeper he ventured into the dungeon, the more ruby veins appeared along the walls. It seemed this place was connected to Crimson Fang Mountain, a branch of the Black-Red Mountain range. After navigating the twisting corridors for a while, Vikir finally saw the light at the end of the path, the dungeon's heart. The dungeon's core was a small chamber. At its center stood a large stone pedestal, upon which a glowing magical artifact rested. Vikir's attention was immediately drawn to the artifact. Approaching the pedestal, he noticed a dried skeleton lying beside it. The skeleton bore signs of violent trauma, as though it had been slashed repeatedly with a blade. Its blood had long since dried, and it was clear that considerable time had passed. Next to the skeleton lay a piece of parchment covered in writing. Judging by the style of the text, it was clear that the deceased had belonged to the Baskerville family. The letter began. At this point, my name no longer matters. Call me Cain, if you will. I see no need to stain this clean sheet of paper with my true name. I write this to ensure those who come after me do not repeat my mistakes. Our family's legends speak of this place as an ancient dungeon. My brother, Abel, happened upon it by chance. Together, we made countless attempts to explore its depths, battling endless hordes of monsters until we finally reached this stone chamber. But here, we encountered the ultimate riddle, which kept us trapped for 3 long years. Reading this far, Vikir deduced that the two brothers must have been consumed by their greed for the treasure. As he continued, he found the ultimate riddle inscribed on a stone pillar. What enters as one, becomes two inside, but must return to one to leave. The letter went on. With our limited understanding of riddles, my brother and I pondered this question for a long time and ultimately reached the same conclusion. We were twins, once a single entity in our mother's womb, but separated into two at birth. For one of us to leave with the treasure, only one could remain. This meant we had to face a deadly duel. After a brutal and exhausting battle, I killed my brother. In the end, I was the only one left in this place. Yet, even after reuniting as one, nothing changed. There was no reward, no treasure to claim. I had killed my brother in vain. The tone of the letter grew increasingly remorseful. Racked with endless regret, I decided to leave this place. To anyone who dares to come here, let me tell you this, leave immediately. This place offers nothing but madness driven by greed. There is nothing here worth taking. After finishing the letter, Vikir casually tossed it aside without a second thought. So, his point is that even after going through all this trouble, there's no reward here, he muttered indifferently. But Vikir wasn't a twin. The riddle remained unchanged, meaning Cain and Abel had solved it incorrectly. After pondering for a long time, Vikir became convinced that the answer must be close by. A dungeon that couldn't be conquered simply didn't exist. Then, as he gazed at his own shadow, the solution dawned on him. So that's what it is, he muttered. Cain and Abel had simply been unlucky. Trapped in their circumstances, the two brothers had been unable to unravel the riddle. The dark tunnel contrasted sharply with the brightly illuminated chamber of stone. The answer to the riddle was the dungeon itself. When we enter, we are one with the darkness of the tunnel. But the moment we reach this chamber, we become two because of the light from the ruby. To open the final area of the chamber, we must return to darkness. The answer is our shadow, Vikir concluded. Without hesitation, he crushed the ruby in his hand. From its shattered fragments emerged a surge of mystical energy, splitting the stone wall before him in two. Vikir's eyes lit up with excitement, and a smile of pure joy spread across his face. So this is what the brothers fought and killed each other over, he mused. Could this be a sacred artifact of a demon? Inside the newly revealed secret chamber stood another pedestal, atop which rested a sword that seemed almost intangible. Etched into the pedestal were the words, "Only the blood of Baskerville can draw Beelzebub." Upon reading the name, Vikir exclaimed in shock. Beelzebub. This was indeed the Beelzebub he had seen illustrated in a book of myths. The gluttonous demon fly Beelzebub. According to ancient mythology, 7 great demons had once plagued the world, each embodying one of the 7 deadly sins. To combat these catastrophes, the leaders of 7 noble families rose to challenge each demon. The demon that the Baskerville family faced was none other than the gluttonous demon fly, Beelzebub. The remnants of Beelzebub had been sealed within the Baskerville territory, and the demonic energy it emitted attracted monsters, or so the legends claimed. Few believed the tales, but Vikir knew the truth. In the future, this very sword would fall into the hands of a demon, bringing death to countless warriors and humans on the battlefield. Not this time, Vikir vowed. This time, it will belong to me. Without hesitation, he reached for the sword. Blood-red energy pierced through his hand, sending searing pain through his body. After an excruciating process of assimilation, the sword became one with him, a weapon crystallized from the remnants of a demon. How much stronger will I become in this life compared to my past? Vikir wondered with anticipation. After retrieving the sword, he meticulously searched the dungeon to ensure nothing was left behind. Satisfied, he prepared to leave. But just as he turned to go, a sudden wave of dizziness overtook him, forcing him to his knees. It wasn't dizziness, it felt more like hunger. Vikir realized the sword, Beelzebub, was screaming to be fed. It seemed to be draining his strength. There truly was no power without a price. At this rate, Vikir feared he would be completely drained. After struggling for a while, he managed to crawl out of the dark dungeon. The ravenous hunger gnawed at him, making his stomach feel like it was being torn apart. His enhanced senses, heightened by hunger, picked up a tantalizing scent nearby. Beelzebub seemed to sense it too, guiding him toward the source. Reluctantly, Vikir followed. To his surprise, the sword led him straight to the corpse of the three-headed dog, Cerberus. Seeing the corpse, Vikir joked to himself, I guess it's time for a feast of dish dog meat. But Beelzebub wasn't interested in dog meat. The sword plunged itself into Cerberus' body, drinking its blood. As the demonic energy coursed through Beelzebub, Vikir felt his stomach come alive again. It seemed the centuries of being sealed had left Beelzebub starving. Not just the corpse but the surrounding plants and soil were drained of life, leaving a barren, desolate area. At this rate, the entire black-red mountain would turn into a wasteland. Fortunately, Beelzebub stopped, seemingly satisfied with its meal. At that moment, Vikir's mind was flooded with information about Beelzebub's unique skill, Beelzebub's hunger. This ability allowed it to absorb an opponent's skills and make them its own. Those absorbed were destroyed. However, since Cerberus was already dead, there was a limit to the skills Vikir could obtain. The skill he inherited was Hellhound's blood, which made even the smallest wound bleed profusely. A valuable ability, though it wasn't Cerberus' strongest. Sensing its master's desire for more, Beelzebub extended its tendrils and continued to drink Cerberus' blood. Though intrigued by what he might gain, Vikir reminded the sword, you can't consume everything. The corpse needs to be intact enough to explain later. But Beelzebub ignored him, greedily draining the body. Annoyed, Vikir gave the sword a sharp smack. You only listen when I use force, don't you? He muttered. This time, all three of Beelzebub's skill slots were filled, Inferno of Cerberus, grade A+, Hellhound's blood, grade B+, and finally, Rapid Regeneration, grade F, which surprisingly came from the corpse of a brown rat beneath Cerberus. Vikir held the tiny corpse in his hand, assessing his harvest. Acquiring the Inferno of Cerberus was undoubtedly a significant gain. This skill could kill instantly, and the agony it inflicted was said to surpass even being burned alive. As for the carcass, it was prepared for the practical exam, so all that was left to do was relax until the evaluation ended. After a grueling month, the young hounds of the Baskerville family returned home, having completed their trial. The evaluation resumed immediately, with the remains of the magical beasts they had hunted being turned into shields, swords, necklaces, and other trophies. However, one of these corpses sent shockwaves through the entire gathering of guide dogs present. When Hugo, the family head, heard the news, he requested confirmation. Chief Steward Barrymore provided a detailed report. Master Vikir van Baskerville, just 8 years old, stumbled upon an uncharted area during the trial and managed to hunt a Cerberus, a great magical beast. The Cerberus had been injured by barbarian tribes and poisoned. Hugo, intrigued, demanded to know what kind of poison could subdue such a formidable creature and how it had been administered. However, Barrymore could only relay what had been recorded in the hunting log, as Vikir had avoided detailed questioning under the pretext of exhaustion. Hugo's face lit up with amusement. This boy is sharp. Knowledge is power, and power defines value. Vikir is proving himself more valuable than ever, he mused, finding this advantageous to his plans. At that moment, Barrymore spoke cautiously. Surprisingly, such talent comes from a Van and not a La or Lu. Before Barrymore could finish, Hugo interrupted him sharply. You misunderstand me, Barrymore. I am not like the previous family heads. I care nothing for bloodlines. When I train a hound, it matters not if they hail from a noble house, royalty, or a brothel. Talent and determination are my only concerns. Weaklings may come from the purest lineage, and greatness may arise from the most humble origins. Realizing his misstep, Barrymore immediately apologized. Fortunately, Hugo was in good spirits and let the matter slide. Shortly after, Vikir was summoned to the family head's office. Like before, Vikir showed no fear, only anticipation. Before any greetings could be exchanged, Hugo went straight to the point. I hear you killed a Cerberus during the trial. How did you do it? Without hesitation, Vikir replied. I used chocolate to kill it. Chocolate is a lethal poison to hellhounds. Hugo, upon hearing the explanation, wasn't particularly surprised. He continued. I also heard that you avoided giving Barrymore a detailed account of the hunt. Why? Vikir's expression remained calm as he replied. Because he is not my master. And who is your master? Hugo pressed further. Vikir answered without missing a beat. As a member of the family, my master can only be the family head. Who else could it be? Having been a loyal hound in his past life, Vikir knew precisely how to answer to earn Hugo's favor. His response pleased Hugo, who flashed a sinister smile. You've learned well. As a reward, the carcass of the magical beast you captured will be yours. Additionally, since you ranked first, I'll grant you a single wish. This was exactly what Vikir had been waiting for. Without hesitation, he used this rare opportunity to request access to the library of 10,000 sacred texts. True to its name, the Library of 10,000 Sacred Texts was a massive archive located in the deepest part of the Baskerville stronghold. It was one of the largest libraries in the Empire, containing countless books. Hugo's expression turned serious upon hearing the request. The Library of 10,000 Sacred Texts. Do you realize only the family head, deputy head, and core members are allowed entry there? Disappointed, Vikir was about to give up and plan to sneak in later when Hugo unexpectedly spoke again. You may enter. I want you to study the 6th form of Baskerville swordsmanship, located in the 6th restricted zone. Vikir was stunned. No illegitimate child bearing the name Van had ever been allowed to learn beyond the 4th form. Hugo himself had mastered up to the 7th form in this lifetime, though in Vikir's past life, Hugo had advanced to the 9th form. Vikir hadn't forgotten the scorn he endured as Hugo's illegitimate son. In this life, he vowed to surpass Hugo, especially since he possessed the sacred tome of swordsmanship, which embodied the true essence of Baskerville's martial arts. Discovered in Vikir's past life, this tome was authored by the first family head, the slayer of one of the 7 calamities. And the man who would hand him this sacred tome? None other than Hugo Le Baskerville, unwitting of its true value. Each man harbored his agenda, each striving toward a hidden goal. But who would prevail in the end? Leaving Hugo's office, Vikir wasted no time heading to the library of 10,000 sacred texts. Guarded with utmost security, it was a place few had ever set foot in, even in his previous life. Vikir had never set foot in this sacred place before. Now, as he stood amidst the countless holy tomes containing sword techniques he had always dreamed of mastering, an indescribable emotion welled up within him. In the Baskerville family, no matter how much mana an illegitimate child possessed, they were strictly forbidden from learning sword techniques beyond the 4th fang. This internal policy was designed to ensure that disposable pawns, bred to be mere hunting hounds, would never possess fangs sharp enough to threaten the family's true heirs. Venturing deep into the library, Vikir eventually found the technique Hugo intended for him to learn, a sword technique of the 6th fang, a feat so unreachable in his previous life that it seemed like a dream. Hugo likely believed it impossible for an 8-year-old to memorize such a technique in just one day. However, before his regression, Vikir had obsessively studied the theories and principles underlying the techniques from the 1st to the 4th fang, to the point where he could even make reasonably accurate assumptions about the 5th fang's techniques without ever having learned them. In the Baskerville family, sword techniques are classified into levels based on the number of fangs they manifest. First fang techniques produce 1 crimson fang-like aura along the blade, second fang techniques produce 2, and so on. These techniques, characterized by their blood-red aura, were unmistakably unique. However, the 6th fang did not captivate Vikir's interest. He had come here with a greater purpose. After skimming the text on the 6th fang and placing the book back in its original position, Vikir fulfilled the task assigned by Hugo. He left the inner section of the library, surprising the guard stationed nearby. Naturally, he couldn't leave without acquiring what he truly sought. Telling the guards he wanted to browse through a few miscellaneous texts before leaving, he dismissed them to return to their posts. The guards thought Vikir was a fool, unaware of the value of the rare tomes within the library's depths, choosing instead to read dusty, disorganized, and seemingly trivial scriptures. But Vikir didn't care about their opinions. There was no way they could know that buried within those neglected shelves lay a hidden treasure. After a prolonged search, he finally found what he was looking for, a book titled Hidden Fang. Holding the book in his hands, Vikir could barely contain his excitement. With this, he was certain he could exact his revenge. Hidden Fang was a simple scripture on the 1st fang technique, a text so unremarkable that even legitimate Baskerville descendants didn't bother to read it. The middle sections of the book had been torn out, reducing it to a mere shadow of its former self, and thus relegating it to the ranks of lowly and miscellaneous texts. However, Vikir knew its true value. Before his regression, Vikir's hunting party had discovered a peculiar artifact on the borderlands atop Black Red Mountain, a fragment of a sword technique, a torn page from a scripture written in the Baskerville family's handwriting. Sensing something unusual about this, Hugo had ordered his subordinates to search the entirety of the grand library of 10,000 scriptures for the corresponding book. That book was Hidden Fang, a scripture authored by the very first head of the Baskerville family, detailing the path to achieving the 10th Fang, a level no one in the family had ever reached. Obsessed with the idea of the 10th Fang, Hugo unleashed the family's hounds to recover the 6 missing pages. The search led to conflicts with 7 other powerful families where the missing pages were hidden. After countless lives of Baskerville hounds were sacrificed, Vikir and his team eventually recovered and presented the missing pages to Hugo. The reward for all that effort? A swift execution. Remembering the bitter betrayal, Vikir felt a surge of hatred. It was indeed a foolish life he would never repeat. Thanks to this scripture, Hugo had surpassed the 7th Fang and reached the 9th, using the lives of countless hunting hounds as stepping stones. But in this lifetime, that would not happen. The hunting hound who tracked down and delivered the missing pages, Vikir, now knew everything. He vividly remembered the contents of the missing pages. The reason he had been unable to ascend beyond the 4th Fang in his past life was that he had never once laid hands on the original scripture. This time, after carefully reading every line in the Hidden Fang, Vikir unraveled every mystery that had eluded him. It was no wonder most would dismiss the text as worthless, full of incoherent ramblings and arrogant claims. Yet, when the missing pages were pieced back together, those incoherent ramblings transformed into a riddle, each line forming part of a masterpiece. Completely engrossed, Vikir lost track of time. He spent an entire day studying the scripture, absorbing its contents so thoroughly that he could now recite it backward if necessary. Once certain no guards were nearby, he decided to put his newfound knowledge to the test. Closing his eyes, he delved into his consciousness. Before him appeared a towering, shadowy figure, a manifestation of his long-held obsession. Vikir's aura glowed blood red, the signature of Baskerville sword techniques. This time, he would carve a new destiny. Upon opening his eyes, Vikir enveloped his arm with a dense layer of aura, using it as a substitute for a sword. He proceeded to execute sword techniques from the 1st Fang to the 4th Fang. His gaze was filled with hatred and a burning determination for revenge. Before his regression, Vikir had lived a shallow life. He had achieved the title of a high-ranking swordmaster through relentless effort, yet he was belittled by his own family for failing to master advanced sword techniques. The sole reason for this failure was his status as an illegitimate child. Vikir resolved never to live such a life again, and this determination fueled his strength, allowing him to surpass his past self. Charging forward, he confronted the shadowy figure in his subconscious, unleashing the 5th Fang technique. The figure instantly transformed into the image of Hugo, only to be slashed into 1,000 pieces. With that, Vikir's consciousness returned to the real world. Though imperfect, he had succeeded in using the 5th Fang technique. Clenching his fists, Vikir smiled in delight. It had been a long time since he had felt this warm, overwhelming sensation, a feeling of triumph and purpose surging from deep within. After his realization, Vikir examined the changes in his body. He had successfully manifested the 5th Fang. With further enhancement of his mana, he would soon reach the strength he had possessed before his regression. The challenge now was deciding how much to reveal to Hugo. I need to give him just enough to gain what I want in return. Too much or too little could be dangerous, Vikir thought carefully. After reaching a decision, he took a magnifying glass from his pocket and placed it by the window alongside the Hidden Fang. As sunlight passed through the glass, it intensified, setting the sacred scripture ablaze. A sly smile crept across Vikir's face. By destroying the book, he ensured Hugo and his hounds could never attain the 10th Fang. The only one who could now reach that level was Vikir himself. As the scripture burned, the guards finally noticed the commotion and rushed over. Adopting an apologetic demeanor, Vikir scratched his head and said, "I'm sorry. I accidentally left the magnifying glass on the book and it caught fire. If necessary, I'll report this to the steward." The guards, fearing punishment from the steward, quickly responded, "Oh no, young master, it's not your fault. We're the ones who failed to keep a proper watch." Vikir seized the moment to change the subject. "You knights must be busy dealing with the conflict at the Morgue family's gemstone mine. Surely you don't have time to worry about minor matters like this, do you? Let's just forget it ever happened." Without giving them a chance to argue further, Vikir turned and walked away, throwing in a final remark, "Let's keep this between us, all right? I'm sure you're very busy." The guards, now feeling indebted to him, agreed. Inwardly, Vikir sneered. Once, he had been just like them, a blindly loyal hunting dog. But now, everything has changed. It was his turn to use the hounds. Leaving the library, Vikir immediately went to meet Hugo. As soon as they saw each other, Hugo asked, "Did you learn anything?" Vikir replied modestly, "A little." Intrigued, Hugo pressed further. "What did you sense in the library?" Feigning innocence, Vikir described, "Something warm yet sharp, soft yet powerful, like waves crashing against a shore." That's what it felt like. Hugo and Barrymore froze at his words. Could he be referring to aura? Aura was proof of having truly stepped into the realm of swordsmanship. Even the most talented individuals, after rigorous training, typically require at least 15 years to reach such a level. Suspicious but curious, Hugo demanded, "Show me." Vikir readily agreed. This was precisely what he had planned, to gain access to even greater resources. A short while later, in the Baskerville family's arena, all the young hounds were gathered. Standing in the center was Vikir Baskerville, calmly holding a sword, preparing to face a magical beast as proof of his abilities. The young hounds murmured in confusion, not understanding what was happening, while Hugo watched with eager anticipation. He had personally chosen a suitable opponent for his beloved son. When the match began, a massive iron gate creaked open, revealing an orc bound in chains. The beast, starved for 5 days, was in a frenzied state, desperate to attack anything in sight. The young hounds gasped in shock at the sight. Normally, only those aged 15 or older could handle such a creature. Still, the presence of numerous knights watching from the sidelines provided some reassurance. As Hugo gave the signal, the orc's chains and muzzle were removed. It immediately charged toward Vikir in a frenzy. Yet, Vikir stood perfectly still, waiting until the last moment before moving. With precise timing, he swung his sword, severing the orc's arm in one fluid motion. Even the older hounds were stunned into silence, unable to believe that an 8-year-old child could achieve such a feat. The orc, stunned after having its arm severed, barely had time to react before Vikir sliced off one of its legs. It collapsed to the ground, looking up at Vikir in sheer terror. Vikir gazed at the creature with the disdain of a predator facing powerless prey. For the first time in its life, the orc was bleeding, and its vaunted super healing ability failed to activate. There was no way a rank C creature like this orc could withstand the power of a rank B+ predator like Vikir, a hellhound hybrid with access to the second slot of Beelzebub's abilities. The hellhound's blood curse prevented the orc's wounds from healing, ensuring its steady demise. The arena erupted in chaos as the spectators broke into heated discussions. Only Hugo remained silent, his sharp gaze fixed on Vikir. The patriarch's expression betrayed his swirling thoughts. Surely, Vikir hadn't shown everything he had learned from the library. Hugo's curiosity turned to astonishment when Vikir raised his sword, enveloping it in a fiery red aura, pulsating like blood. The orc, struggling to rise, was met with a devastating strike that crushed its skull. For a moment, silence reigned. The pitiful orc never stood a chance. In this battle, the true monster was Vikir. Hugo almost leaped out of his seat, his composure on the verge of breaking. Never before had he seen a prodigy of this caliber. A genius of this magnitude was unheard of, not only in the Baskerville clan but across the empire. Yet, Hugo restrained his excitement as he scrutinized the situation. Something was amiss. The orc's natural regenerative abilities should have kicked in, but they hadn't. It was clear that the creature had been severely weakened before the fight. Even so, Barrymore, Hugo's loyal steward, understood his master's unspoken thoughts. Hugo was elated. With such a talent in his grasp, the future of the Baskerville clan seemed brighter than ever. As the battle concluded, Vikir's voice rang out, breaking the momentary stillness. "Father, do you have anything stronger than an orc?" Gasps rippled through the crowd of young hounds. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Had the boy lost his mind? Was the orc not enough for him? But Vikir had a different plan in mind. He calculated the exact amount of power to reveal, enough to earn recognition without raising unnecessary suspicion. If everything went well, his accomplishments would be acknowledged, and he might even secure a degree of independence from Hugo's control. Hugo's lips curved into a pleased smile. "It seems the orc we went to such lengths to capture wasn't enough to satisfy my son's hunger." When the next creature was brought out, the arena fell deathly silent. A massive troll lumbered forward, shackled with an array of heavy chains far exceeding those used for the orc. Its towering form exuded menace, but instead of fear, Vikir's face lit up with excitement. Without hesitation, he charged at the beast. The troll roared and slammed its enormous fist into the ground, the impact shaking the arena. For a creature of its size, its speed was unexpectedly nimble. Fortunately, Vikir leaped behind the troll in time to evade the attack, narrowly avoiding being flattened. Rather than counterattacking immediately, Vikir retreated to create distance. He understood the troll's incredible regenerative capabilities. Any superficial wounds would only waste his energy. If he wanted to defeat it, he needed a precise and lethal strategy. As Vikir continued dodging, the young hounds in the stands were awestruck. A mere 8-year-old can analyze and adapt like this? However, Vikir wasn't simply reacting, he was putting on a show. In truth, he was far more capable than he let on. If he unleashed his full strength, the troll wouldn't last a second, but that would only complicate matters. His goal was to defeat the troll in a way that appeared natural and believable. After a prolonged exchange, Vikir finally saw his opportunity. The troll exposed a glaring weakness, and Vikir capitalized on it, delivering a deep slash across its shoulder. The beast fell to its knees, roaring in pain. Yet, a single strike of the first fang wasn't enough to kill it. Hugo called out from the stands, concern creeping into his voice. "You can stop now, Vikir. Any more and it'll become dangerous." But Vikir interrupted him. "I'm so close, father. I feel like I'll understand something if I push just a bit further. If I can't end it with the next strike, I'll surrender." Seeing his son's determination, Hugo reluctantly gave his approval. Vikir gripped his sword tightly and focused. His body radiated an intense crimson aura, brimming with killing intent. The troll, sensing danger, charged at Vikir in a blind rage. But it was too late. From the ground, a blood-red shadow rose, a pair of glowing eyes and razor-sharp fangs materialized, slicing through the troll's neck in an instant. The beast's head toppled to the ground, its lifeless body following suit. The audience was stunned into silence. What they had just witnessed was unprecedented. In the Baskerville clan, the path of a swordsman followed a strict progression. By the age of 15, most young hounds could imbue their blades with mana and master the first fang of Baskerville swordsmanship. Yet here was an 8-year-old boy who had just achieved what most wouldn't reach until they were 18, the mastery of the second fang. On that day, a true anomaly was born. Feigning surprise at his strength, Vikir turned to Hugo and flashed an innocent, boyish smile. Meanwhile, Hugo sat frozen, unable to reconcile the boy before him with the unfathomable display he had just witnessed. 1 week later, inside the dining hall of the Baskerville family, Vikir sat absent-mindedly poking at his plate of food. No matter how many times he ate it, he still couldn't get used to the random stew. And even though he wasn't doing anything, people around him instinctively avoided him. He couldn't help but remember how Hugo had been completely bewildered before. The power Vikir had revealed, his second fang of Baskerville, was the strength of a mid-level swordsman. His true power, the fifth fang, was weaker, close to the strength of a low-ranking swordsman. Including the C+ skill and the super regeneration from the troll he had just acquired, he was certainly stronger than an average swordsmanship graduate. But the price for all this power was an insatiable hunger. As Vikir was lost in thought, the 3 Baskerville brothers appeared behind him. Vikir immediately emitted a terrifying aura and threatened them. "Did I go too easy on you guys before?" The 3 brothers, recalling the terrifying memories, quickly explained, "We just wanted to say that you looked so cool when you killed the Cerberus and the troll." Flattered by the praise, Vikir almost choked. His whole body shivered as he worried about the consequences of his actions. He decided to punch each of them once and think about it later. Just then, the butler Barrymore appeared, informing Vikir that Hugo wanted to see him. Vikir was surprised. He had no idea why Hugo would suddenly want to meet him. At Hugo's office, the vice-clan leader of the Morg family, Adolphe Morg, was having a meeting. Adolphe spoke first. "Lord Hugo, you still look the same, huh? I hope this year's annual event doesn't end up causing too many problems." Hugo calmly replied, "Yeah, this joint training should wrap up without much trouble, right?" Adolphe then asked, "But didn't both families have serious injuries last year? If that's not a problem, then what is?" Hugo, poked at by the comment, became a bit irritated. A small scratch turned into a serious injury? It seems like the Morg family's younger members exaggerated things a bit. Adolphe shot back, "Well, the Morg family is a prestigious and noble clan, you know." The two were visibly tense, almost about to clash. The prestigious mage family Morg and the iron-blooded swordsman family Baskerville. At first, the two families didn't have such conflicts. Magic and swordsmanship were complementary forces, according to the Emperor's words from 2 generations ago. Following his advice, the Baskerville and Morg families had begun joint training programs, open only to children aged 8 to 15. The annual event started with a good atmosphere, but eventually, a dispute arose over the ownership of a red gem mine in the contested territory between the two families, straining the relationship between the clan leaders. After greetings, Adolphe probed for recent information. "I hear there's a rising star in the Baskerville family. A once-in-a-century talent from your clan who will be a great boon for the Empire." Hugo couldn't help but smile at this, clearly pleased. "This isn't something you should focus on." Adolphe was surprised. He hadn't expected the cold-hearted Hugo to react so warmly to praise for his son. Not to be outdone, Adolphe also boasted, well, we could call it double luck. A genius has also appeared in the Morgue family. At that moment, a beautiful girl with fiery red hair entered and sat beside Adolphe. Adolphe placed his hand on her shoulder and introduced her. This is my niece, Camus. Camus immediately spoke, Sir, you're the thief who stole our red gem, right? Please return it to us. Hugo, called a thief, was furious. His eyes turned bloodshot, and his entire being radiated with killing intent. Adolphe quickly intervened to stop his niece from causing a conflict between the two families. Though Hugo was angry, he kept his composure and retorted, a little puppy like you has no idea what you're talking about. Don't try to justify the Morgue family's teaching methods to me. Camus glared at Hugo and shouted, give us back the red gem. I can't even continue my research because of it. But Hugo couldn't tolerate the insult anymore. His murderous intent was so palpable that it seemed he would kill her on the spot. Just then, a voice rang out. I guess the Morgue family doesn't teach their children not to covet what belongs to others. Adolphe immediately recognized the voice. It was the rising star from Baskerville, the one everyone had been talking about. Before he could act, he noticed his disrespectful niece had run off. Camus had gone directly to confront Vikir. Seeing her made Vikir stare in astonishment. He looked at Camus, the future queen of the Morgue family, known even among the many supreme mages of the prestigious family as the greatest of all talents. During her peak, she had single-handedly conquered all the monsters on Black Red Mountain. Her reputation for burning them alive and turning them into ash and blood had spread far and wide. Moreover, her beauty was so captivating that the elite class was enamored, enough to manipulate the royal family, earning her the title of representative of the government. But that was a story for the distant future. Right now, she was still just an 8-year-old child. Camus crossed her arms and shouted at Vikir, why is the red gem yours? It belongs to us. Vikir remained calm and replied, you must have worked so hard to get here only to throw a tantrum like a child. Her words immediately caught the attention of the adults nearby. Camus, furious, prepared to use magic to strike. You called it a tantrum? Well, I'll show you why the red gem belongs to the Morgue family in a way your puny little brain can understand. But instead of attacking, Camus used ice magic to create a detailed model of the territory between the two families. She then began to explain, the border between the Morgue and Baskerville families is known as the Common Security Zone. The problem is that the entrance to the mine is located on the Morgue family's land, while the underground mine is in Baskerville's territory. The structure of the mine makes it so that Baskerville cannot exploit the red gem, meaning it rightfully belongs to the Morgue family. However, your family has insisted that we have encroached on your territory and interfered with the mining operations of our Ruby, Oregon. Moreover, you've rejected our proposal to lease the relevant land. This argument left Hugo at a loss for words, merely displaying his frustration, while Adolphe chuckled with amusement. Upon hearing this, Vikir immediately countered. Ruby ore, indeed, is often used as a magical material, and the Baskerville family doesn't need the extracted ruby ore, he began. But leasing land? It seems the greatest tragedy of your family is that no one in Baskerville is foolish enough to lease their land for mere pocket change. Refusing to back down, Camus pointed to a model of the disputed territories. This here is your family's land, and this part is ours, she said, leaning over and extending her hand across the boundary. With a sly grin, Vikir grasped her hand tightly. Are you asking whose land your hand belongs to when it crosses into our territory? Naturally, it belongs to me. It was the first time Camus had ever held hands with a boy, and her face turned crimson. Flustered, she stammered, what nonsense are you talking about? Why would I belong to you? You're ridiculous. But Vikir's intention was far from romantic. He pulled out a dagger from his belt and placed it in front of her, his expression turning dangerously serious. Who said you belong to me? I said your hand belongs to me. Everyone in the room froze in shock, cold sweat trickling down their faces. Was this truly something an 8-year-old child could say? As the adult stood paralyzed, Vikir raised the dagger and brought it close to Camus' hand. His face was filled with deadly intent, leaving no doubt he wasn't joking. Camus, utterly terrified, could only scream for help. Adolphe finally reacted, releasing a massive wave of mana to suppress Vikir. Taking advantage of Vikir's momentary distraction, Camus quickly yanked her hand back and fled, crying. For all her future reputation as the queen of the Morgue family, a formidable mage, she was, for now, just a child. Adolphe turned to Hugo, demanding an explanation. Vikir, sensing the rising tension, retracted his killing intent and bowed his head slightly. I only meant to tease her a little. I didn't expect her to cry. My apologies. Now standing beside him, Camus dared to shake her tiny fist at Vikir. But seeing his calm, mischievous smile, it was clear she was on the verge of receiving a dose of retaliation. And so, the friendly competition between the Baskerville and Morg families began. This annual event brought together children aged 8 to 15 to engage in various challenges. The younger children, around 8 years old, competed in mana theory or mana sensing. However, most of the attention was focused on the life and death matches among the 15-year-olds. This year, all eyes were fixed on two individuals, Camus Morg, the prodigious heir of the Morg family, and Vikir van Baskerville, the rising star of the Baskerville clan. The duel between the famed magical lineage of Morg and the fearsome swordmasters of Baskerville promised to be an unforgettable clash. How will this epic battle unfold? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Peace.